Hey everyone, I'm here with Katie Halper of The Katie Halper Show. Support her on Patreon. She's awesome. And we were actually together at the Cynthia Nixon, Zephyr Teachout, Jumaane Williams joint election night party. It did not go as either of those three candidates wanted, or a lot of progressives. So we're kind of going to do a post-mortem on what happened that day, that night, and really the state of New York electoral politics, because there were actually some really good things that came out of it. The IDC, the leaders of them, are completely eradicated. I'm sure you've already seen some of the reporting on this channel about that, so I don't need to fill you guys in. But New York is terrible on voter suppression, and it gets almost no media coverage. So I wanted to dive into that with Katie, but first let's just kind of, what are your thoughts on what happened on New York election night, since we haven't been able to really talk afterwards?
So yeah, I saw you there, and it was funny, we were coordinating about when we would be talking to each other. I wanted to talk to you for my show, and for WBI, you want to talk to me for the Young Turks. And I was running late because my train had been rerouted, derailed, all of those things. And exploded. And that, of course, was so apt because it was I was on the way to a party that I wanted to be the victory party of Cynthia Nixon, and one of the things she was running against Cuomo on was his handling of the MTA. So I felt like that was his move. When I got there to the party, I was really excited because the numbers were good for Jumaane Williams, who's running for lieutenant governor. He was winning. And then I heard someone say, yeah, but they haven't gotten all the counties in, or I think they hadn't gotten upstate yet.
Right.
He had got a lot of the urban vote, not euphemistically, I guess, in both senses.
No, literally the urban vote.
Right. I cried during all their speeches. I cried during Zephyr's when she lost. During Nixon's speech, what was so moving is I realized how she really didn't need to do this. Like, they asked her to do it. Progressive organizations wanted someone to take on Cuomo, and she did it. The smear against her as an anti-Semite, or being soft on anti-Semitism, like, it just so, I just stopped, like, while she was giving her speech, she mentioned stuff about thanking different politicians who had supported her, and she didn't name them. I don't remember this. She's like, I'm not going to name you guys because you'd have to go into hiding.
Right.
Like, Cuomo is a bully, and he has bullies working for him, and the press does his bullying work, and, the New York State Democrats do his bullying work, because I'm sure you guys talked about this, right? It turned out that they did a mailer that called her soft on anti-Semitism. Cuomo pretended he didn't know about it, and then they found, like, an email from the Cuomo campaign to the New York Post, suggesting that they do a story on this. It's the same setup.
I think I came up with this, but I think it's like the perfect analogy for it. He's Hillary Clinton on all policy, but with Trump's bullying nature.
Oh, that is that's true.
I was particularly bummed about Zephyr Teachout, who, it's her third run for public office, and she's kind of gotten just bad luck all three times, I would say. I think she's run good campaigns.
I don't even think it's luck. I think it's systemic, and it's not her fault. It shows the strength of the machine, right?
Right.
I mean, I think that what's hard is that she's come so close, right? So it looks like luck, but I think it actually shows her as like a prophet almost, not to sound like, evangelical, obviously, as a secular Jew. I couldn't even if I tried to. But, she's a bit ahead of her time, I think. Like, she came really close, much closer than people thought she would, at least with the governor's role in the governorship against Cuomo in, when was that, in 2014? And then
in 2016, she ran for Congress, was favored to win because people thought Hillary Clinton would do better and that she would, they would vote down ticket, but actually where she was running in New York State, it was pretty pro-Trump, and they voted down ballot.
Right. And then this, and I said this to you, I don't know if it's in the video that went out, but I remember saying, like, people, if you don't vote for Zephyr Teachout, all you resistance people, Mick resistance people, like, you'll have blood on your hands. And I stand by that. It's not a very diplomatic way of saying it, but it's true, because forget how hard she is on Democratic corruption and all that. Like, Zephyr Teachout is one of the smartest legal minds out there, and we've seen that the courts have been used a lot to stop Trump, and have served as an obstacle to Trumpism and Trump. She really was. I interviewed her for the Young Turks, and she said that the New York, this is her wording, but obviously I agree with her, and it's true, and I think it's not very debatable, like one of the most important offices in the country is the New York Attorney General's office, because so much of Trump's illegality takes place here.
I hope that one day she gets to the mountaintop, because she really does deserve to be in public office.
Yeah.
And Jumaane Williams, you know, he kind of came out of nowhere in this race and got a lot of, I mean, I know he's been
organizing
for a long
yes.
time, but in terms of national media attention, not much. And to see him be in the lead and then for it to fall apart like that was
really
pretty
sad.
tough.
And also, who the hell gets excited about Kathy Hochul? Like, tell me one thing she's ever done.
It's name recognition.
Yeah, and this, in case you don't know, because no one knows who she is because she doesn't do anything, is Kathy Hochul is lieutenant governor.
So she was the incumbent and she defeated Jumaane, who did surprisingly well despite polling showing him down by 20 points. You know, Zephyr was within 5 points of the leader, and the leader didn't even win either. I mean, Maloney was it.
Yeah,
the polling on the state level.
Him also? Can we get rid of, like, can we punish this Maloney guy for running?
So he split the vote upstate. He was simultaneously running for Attorney General in Congress, and he's a Wall Street Democrat through and through, voted to deregulate the banks and then hid behind, oh, it's for African American businesses. Oh, really?
Yeah, right.
Yeah, that's the worst. Andrew Cuomo is guilty of that. But before we kind of, wrap up our postmortem of what happened, I think it's really important to talk about the voter suppression in the state.
Can I just say one thing before we get to that? Because it'll be a good transition. I think that one thing that was so important that Zephyr said during her speech was that she said, I want to congratulate Cynthia Nixon. She was talking about the Nixon-Cuomo race, but what she said applies to all of these races. She said, there's going to be a lot of discussion about the different messages of the different campaigns, meaning Cuomo and Nixon. She says, and you can't talk about politics without talking about money. And just remember, when people talk about the messages, they need to talk about the fact that Cuomo spent $24 million to defeat Cynthia Nixon. And she still came in, at 34% or something, and that's incredible.
Yeah.
Which it is, because what happens is you have people who pretend that they are just looking at the numbers, just looking at the stats, the polls, and then they say, well, I guess this proves you can't run a progressive campaign, you can't run on these ideas, you can't run against these ideas. And if you say that and you don't look at the way the money influenced the turnout and the incumbency and like the political machine, but forget those things, let's just look at money. Like, you can't actually say that. You'd be able to say that if Cynthia Nixon had spent $24 million.
Right.
Then you could isolate it
right.
as the cause of the loss. But you can't, given that it's so asymmetrical.
Exactly.
Remember that, guys.
Yeah. Message from Katie.
Yeah.
And
Zeph.
And through Katie as her conduit. And I think it's not getting enough press attention, but The Atlantic had a great piece about how bad New York is in terms of its voter laws. We know this. We knew this from Bernie Sanders versus Hillary Clinton notoriously, but those horrific policies persist, and the voter suppression is real, and I don't know how it affected this race. We will never know, but here is just some of what The Atlantic had to say about it. Clumsily designed ballots, an antiquated registration process, confusing deadlines and outdated laws, long lines and no early voting. New York State, caricatured as a bastion of progressive politics, has some of the most retrograde voting laws and practices in the nation. Reports of dysfunction from Thursday's primary only add to the evidence. New York is disenfranchising its citizens. Only 57% of eligible voters cast a ballot in the 2016 presidential election, ranking the Empire State 41st in the nation for turnout. In the last midterm election, turnout statewide hit an abysmal 34%, almost the lowest in the country. In New York City, just 12% of eligible voters showed up for the 2017 mayoral primary. The problem isn't energy or enthusiasm. New Yorkers are as tuned into politics as anyone. The problem is the system. And the headline of the article is New York's worst in the country voting system. The supposedly progressive state is disenfranchising its citizens. And I thought that was a fantastic article in the way that it was so caustic, because it's appropriately so. New York State is supposed to be the blue. California, New York, huge blue states. California, the jungle primary is bizarre, but at least it's way more inclusive of the people trying to vote in their state. It's just, it's a bummer that this is what this state is, and it's because it's under the leadership of someone like Andrew Cuomo,